We're talking about Airflow then and now. And I get to tell the story of how Airflow came to be, as well the early days of the project. But before I get started, so I wanted to say, like, I never would have thought that this project would get so big. So it's amazing to see just like how much this community has grown, how much the project was pushed forward by so many people. So from seeing that, I get a super strong feeling of pride on one end, and also a deep feeling of humility as well, from like just realizing how much people have done to push this forward. It takes a community to do anything at this scale. Airflow is so many people, and projects of this scale are not built alone. So today I get to tell some of that story of how it came to be, and how people have been working on this project. So I wanted to thank the organizer. I think Ash mentioned it, but it takes a lot to put an event like this together. And I got involved just enough with the organization of the event to know just how much work got done and what it takes to put an event like this together. So thank you to the organizers. And I wanted to say too that in this time of uncertainty, isolation, polarization, it's great to have communities like this one that bring people together and that keep us together. So I'm really grateful for this community and all the communities that I'm part of. So as I said, so I'm excited to tell the story of how Airflow came to be. So programming and open source collaboration is very left brain in general. So the way that we collaborate is really kind of logical. It's all about reason, architecture, concepts. And I think too often we forget that behind these projects, there are, real people with motivations and careers, and lives of their own. So today I get to tell some of that story that's a little bit more right brain, and that's exciting to not be talking about features and changelog for once and be talking about the people. A little bit about me before I get to tell the story. So my name is Max. I've been doing open source for a little bit now, or for 5 or 6 years. So since the beginning of Airflow. I've got this deep passion for building data tools. I think I really found myself building these interactive, highly visual, interactive type tools. I'm the one who started the project back in 2014. I'm going to be talking about that over the next 10 minutes or so. And soon after, I went on to start another project that's called Apache Superset. That's a data visualization, exploration, dashboarding platform that I've been contributing to ever since. More recently, so about a year and a half ago, I started a company called Preset, and Preset is offering a hosted solutions around Apache Superset and analytics in general. So that was a little bit about me. Today, I'm going to talk about this early phase. So this is talking about Superset. This is a Superset visualization showing the stream of contribution, so PRs of the top 25 contributors based on the number of PRs. And I wanted to show this visualization to show that I'm going to be talking about this left side of a highlighted section of the graph, essentially the pre-Airflow days, kind of how Airflow came to be and the early days of the project. And one thing that's kind of really interesting to notice on this chart is just how much more like the velocity and just seeing like how much happened kind of in the second phase of the project that I think Bolke is going to be talking more about in this part of the presentation. Cool. So first I wanted to talk about the context. So what was going on, in my head at the time before Airflow was even an idea, right? Where did I come from? What kind of tools that I use? Which places I worked at? So I spent over a decade working just as a data warehouse architect and business intelligence engineer, using all sorts of drag and drop tools like SQL Server, integration services, Informatica, IBM Data Stage. And I wrote, there's kind of no nice way to put it. I just wrote a shit ton of ETL for like more than a decade or so. I wrote more SQL than anyone should ever have to write in their lifetime. Lots of store procedures, lots of ETL tools. And that was kind of the early phase of my career, and then joined Yahoo. So when I joined Yahoo in 2007, I think there was like this clear transition from kind of the more traditional ETL data tools world towards like the more Hadoop kind of data lake slash distributed systems type world. And that transition was happening while I was there. So 2007 was the early days of Hadoop at Yahoo. And then clearly, like I kind of had a foot on both sides, the pre-data engineering world and what was going to become more data engineering. And by the time I joined Facebook in 2012 or so, the world, at least internally at Facebook, had completely changed, where we realized that a lot of the tools that we had used in the past to do data engineering were just not going to work at Facebook scale. And when I'm talking about Facebook scale too, I mean the size of the data on one front, but also the size of the data teams and the people that were working with data, right? So we had internally at Facebook we had thousands of people writing data pipelines, and the tools that we had used in the past were just not going to work. So that's where I think, to me, like data engineering, at least, was born in the modern sense of the term. I wrote a blog post in maybe 2016 or so called "The Rise of the Data Engineer," kind of doing a little bit of an account of this transition, if it's something you're interested in looking into. While at Facebook too, there was like all sorts of new tooling and new ideas and new ways of doing things. Some of these things were things like Hadoop and Hive were really active, but a lot of glue kind of code too, as to like how to orchestrate pipelines, a lot of streaming frameworks. So it was really dynamic. And I got involved in two little projects that were used for data pipelines. One was DataBee and one called DataSwarm. And those were kind of the winning experiments of all the ways that you could author data pipelines internally at Facebook. Those projects were internal and not open source, but became a source of inspiration for what became Airflow later. So coming out of Facebook, so how did this idea become a thing? So there was this idea that I'd been wanting for a long time to get involved in open source. And in 2014, some friends that had left Facebook to join Airbnb I had some conversations with them, and they were talking about some of the challenges that were happening at the time that they were facing internally at Airbnb, things around data quality, chaos in the data warehouse, analytics, unreliable analytics in general. And they were using something called Kronos on top of Mesos. That's an early open source project scheduler for Mesos. And they had really pushed this to its limit. And they were looking to kind of build something new and kind of solve these challenges. So it became apparent that I could, quit my job at Facebook that I liked and that I really loved, but for this opportunity to go and start an open source project that could address some of these challenges. So 2014, I left my job at Facebook and I decided to take a month off before I was going to join Airbnb, and took a moment there because that's the way it goes in Silicon Valley. If you want to get a vacation, the only time that you can kind of get a vacation is in between two jobs. So took some time off, went to Mexico for a few weeks, and that's where on that beach, on that slide that you're looking at, this picture, this is where Airflow was born. So I brought a laptop and I started writing, I started writing code, essentially like knowing what I was going to build. And I believe it was called Flux at the time. So the first early commits, the project was going to be called Flux. And I just started hammering at it. So by the time I joined Airbnb on my first day, I already had a working prototype with a little bit of web server with some of the base classes, and there was a way already to author some pipelines and get them to execute. So what's interesting about that is the fact that because it was in between two jobs, I started the project open source on my personal GitHub. So people have asked me before, like, hey, how did you get, people on board at Airbnb to open source this piece of software? And it was just always open source. So by the time I joined, it was already in the open. Cool. So I've been using this this analogy of like planting the seeds, right? So I kind of planted the seed of Airflow, and like I was the early gardener, and maybe the first person who kind of cared for that seed as it grew early on. But I wanted to talk about the garden in which it grew. So Airbnb was just this fantastic garden, a fantastic place to grow a piece of software like Airflow. So I landed there in a team of three data engineers. So I was the fourth data engineer at Airbnb at the time. And Aaron, Jonathan, Sid were there. Arthur joined soon after. And these guys were basically building this island of sanity in the data warehouse at the time. So the data warehouse had been kind of this chaotic thing up until then, where a lot of people would write all sorts of pipelines in all sorts of ways. And then this team was really going more in a much more rigorous way, building things with data quality checks, SLAs, and good naming conventions. And they were doing continuous improvement on these pipelines instead of just kind of throwing them out there. And these guys were just really early adopters of Airflow and early advocates and early contributors. And that really helped the project to start. We also had a good data infra team, right? So data platform team with good knowledge and how to run things at scale, how to productionize things. So they really helped me with the DevOps side of things and getting this thing to run in production. We also had like this awesome kind of executive sponsorship or executive support for open source for this project. So Riley and Jen really kind of helped legitimize the project and sponsor it early on. And I think like the most important thing is that we had this just like this deep need for it. So people really kind of got on board quickly, started using the tool, and quickly it grew from a handful of DAGs to dozens and hundreds of DAGs pretty quickly. So from there, the growth was pretty organic, at least internally at Airbnb, right? Like the need was there, and people kind of picked up on it. We just saw like great adoption as we were solving this real problem that we had. It also grew externally very well and very nicely. So at that time, I would engage with pretty much any team out there that was curious about Airflow. So luckily, being in South Market, being in San Francisco and in Silicon Valley, it was easy for a team like where the density of startup is very high. It was easy for me to go and visit these teams or to host them. I think that helped kind of kick off the project and get people on board early on. And I think one day, fairly early on, I forgot exactly when in time that happened, but I realized that like the project had completely outgrown me personally, right? Where the proportion of things and the force that was behind the project was much more than what I had ever put inside of it. And it became clear that even if I was to try to stop the project, which I never like, there's no reason for me to do that, but like just to know that it has its own a life of its own, and that's a really great feeling. I have a little bit of a timeline here of some of the key moments. So first commit is in November 2014. First internal contribution soon after that by Krishna at Airbnb. We went in production at Airbnb super early, so kind of release early, release often. went live, within a few months. Gave a talk also very early at Strata. That's where I first met Sid, who's probably in the audience today, but Sid was an early contributor, advisor, and also the person to pushed in the direction of joining the Apache Software Foundation. So a lot of help from Sid early on. Then first external contributor very soon after the Strata talk. Bolke first commit is less than a year into the project, and there was definitely many more to come. He's going to get to talk about what happened in that era too. We joined the incubation at the ASF in 2016. First Apache release, and the rest is history. And before I hand it over to Bolke, one thing I wanted to say is that really often I think there's asymmetric rewards for the creator of an open source project, right? We get more merit sometimes. I feel like I get more merit than I really deserve. I think the real hard work is not coming up with the prototype or the first version, but it's really to grow and maintain a solid system that's production ready and that works in all sorts of environment for all sorts of people and use cases. So wanted to get my hats off to all of the contributors and everyone in the community that got involved. This visualization that you're looking at is a simple thing, looking at the number of PRs, comments, reactions, and reviews that are a good proxy for engagement on the project. And it's easy to see just how much work has gone into it by so many people. So I wanted to get my hat off to some of these people. And I'm going to hand it over here to Bolke for the second phase, so for him to talk about kind of what happened after all this. Thank you.
History, how I got to experience it. That let me take you back to the summer of 2015. As Max mentioned, it was around my first commit or PR to Airflow, and the world has not met the COVID-19 yet. And Max is still working, of course, at Airbnb, and Hadoop is still a thing. I run a research and development department at ING Bank, where we want to build products that are driven by algorithms and a lot of data. Think of improving your mortgage interest ratings, anti-money laundering, and optimized hedging for our corporate clients, thus improving the lives of our customers. It's a small department of about 20 people, but with big ambitions. So think big, start small. We set out to build our platform. So think lots of machines, okay? Maybe just 10, but they were big. And think state of the art with Hadoop 2.8 and think of a lot of data, but well, not so much yet, as it became clear that in the bank it's actually quite hard to get to data. But hey, we were very enthusiastic, and that should make up for a lot, right? So we grew over time and really had the startup feeling. We talked to clients and we got our first real data in, and we even had our first internal product as an MVP called Pitchford. Pitchford made visible what the buyer and supplier dependencies were between companies. It predicted what financial products would work best for these companies, and it gave insight into the risk. To drive Pitchford, we pulled in transaction data from many different sources, cleaned it up, ran our algorithms, and crossed our fingers it would end up as intended in the application. Automation was done via shell scripts, and we put them into a contract as we really couldn't figure out how Uzi worked. Probably sounds familiar to a lot of you. It broke down now and then. Nevertheless, hand-holding wasn't a problem because it was our baby, and what do you do with babies? Yes, you babysit them. This wasn't an issue until it was. People leave the company, want to do other stuff, and product changes. More products are added to the portfolio, data sources get updated or they expire. Data sources are not so available as their SLA states. We understood that if you want to create multiple products sustainably, we would need something to manage workflows and data around those products. With thousands of tasks and with the certainty of failures, you need not only to create data pipelines, but you will also need to make a mechanism there to operate and maintain them. So we set out to find a tool that could support us. And of course, we ended up with Luigi. Luigi is great. It understands tasks, it has a UI, it does dependency resolution and workflow management, integrates with our familiar cron and with plenty of services. It comes from a cool company called Spotify, where everyone's favorite music is, and of course, it has a very cool name. So I mentioned this to the team and said, hey, let's try out this great tool from Spotify. It has all these great features, right? Hold your horses, said one of the data scientists, and I'll repeat one of those data scientists. You might want to look at this other tool from Airbnb. It's much cooler because it can do backfills, retries, and so on. Sure, I said. What is that tool called? It's called Airflow. And this guy, Mr. Crunch, created it. So let me give you some background. I work for a company called ING Bank. We have over 53,000 employees and we serve around 38 million customers in over 40 countries. It's called an enterprise. We use established software brands and it often takes years to integrate new technologies. So now this data scientist, again, I repeat, this data scientist wants me to go for Airflow, which had a measly 300 GitHub stars versus the over 2,000 GitHub stars from Luigi. Its main author, Mr. Crunch, seemed to enjoy watermelon as much as a tourist in Amsterdam might enjoy a space cake. So, really? Right. Yeah, let's do this, right? Nevertheless, there was something attractive to the vibe of this project on GitHub. The authors were responsive, appreciated contributions, and even gave props to the best contributors by adding awkward cat pictures. So, something had to be good, right? Absolutely. Airflow does configuration as code. It also has a great UI, command line tools, its own scheduler, and what everyone loves, start dates at the end of the interval. Security is built in. Oh, what's that? Security built in? There was no such thing as security in Airflow at the time. It was the land of plenty for anyone who knew the URL of an Airflow deployment. Clearing tasks, reading code of DAGs, it was just awesome. You did not have to log in to the user interface at all. And I know these capitalist people in the Bay Area do not like Karl Marx, but I can assure you this was the ultimate pipe dream of a communist. We don't really have a need for it, I remember Max saying. I can't remember if I fell off my chair or if I didn't. But I did mention I work for a bank, right? So yeah, I did, I think. So I got the work laid out for me. And I started writing my first Python code. My girlfriend didn't like it that I spent quite a bit of the summertime behind the computer screen. And I bet Max did not know that my pull requests dealing with over 55,000 lines of code were actually the first Python code I ever created. I was so nervous when I created the pull request that added LDAP authentication. I thought now this super open source guru would call me out on the quality of my code and would recognize me for what I was, a newbie. But that never happened. My code was merged and Mr. Crunch commented on the pull request, "This is awesome." And I think I even got a cat picture as a bonus. Wow. I was in heaven and addicted. I had my day job as a manager, but at night I was a coder. I worked on the scheduler with Jeremiah, reworked the whole logging framework with Dan, got Foco involved with Spark operators. Together we got Airflow in a better shape. More features were added and its stability improved. Sid said to Max, "Let's move this to the Apache Software Foundation and let's be committers." And so it happened. The software we were creating was used by dozens of companies, startups and larger companies. And we were featured on Hacker News multiple times. I got the feeling I was part of something bigger and that we were going to change the world. This feeling has never gone away. It's easy to contribute. Airflow has a low barrier to entry. You can just do a pip install Airflow and you get a working setup. This allows people to contribute easily without wasting time on getting their build system up and running. It even holds true today in the times of the Kubernetes executor. You can still just do a pip install Airflow and start coding. And with the Breeze and development environment, we even made it easier. Airflow grows with your company. Startups pick it up because it's just there. Large corporations scale it horizontally to 100,000 tasks a day. In Russia, there's that one person that does Bayesian filtering on a crazy scale. And this is the core strength of Airflow. And with the help of its welcoming committers, contributors, and users, a community formed around it. And this community is growing at an ever faster rate, as Max showed you. Did you know that we have over 1,200 contributors and over 17,000 GitHub stars? And over 3,500 people have registered for this event. The enterprise is not forgotten. Multiple companies like Astronomer, Google, and GoDaddy-Driven are now backing up Airflow, giving it that extra credibility. You can have a managed Airflow if operating Airflow itself at scale is too daunting a task for you. Consultants help you fine-tune your DAGs and optimize them for scale. Features like lineage are being added that help you manage your GDPR and CCPA requirements. And did you know that Airflow is creating jobs? You can now search for Airflow jobs on multiple websites like Glassdoor.com or Indeed. And there's a dedicated job Slack channel. How cool is that? The future looks bright indeed. And you know what? Airflow 2.0 might just be around the corner. So today, I hope that I got the message across that Airflow was and remains a very welcoming community. And the community is what makes Airflow great. As a community, we're not unaware of what's happening in the outside world. Unfortunately, people have lost their lives for no other apparent reason than the color of their skin. Perspectives change over time, but at any given moment, the Airflow community wants to be a home for anyone interested in data and workflow orchestration, no matter what one looks like or one's heritage. Hence, we have made some changes to ensure this, and we will do so in the future again. If you want to know more, please join us for the keynote by ASML Nurmagomedov and Griselda Guevas on Thursday. Thank you very much for attending, and we can take questions now, I think.
Great. Thank you very much, Max and Bolke. We have, see if there's got any questions. If you do have questions, you can either type them into the Airflow attendees, Airflow Summit attendees Slack channel, or into the question and answer box in Crowdcast, and then I will forward them on, and Max and Bolke can ask them. Gotcha, yes. Also, so I guess kind of let's start with a simple one, which is, I know the answer, but maybe you can kind of talk about it. It's just, is there any certification for Airflow? So, professional qualifications. I'm an Airflow certified engineer.
I can certify anyone. Just ask me, and I've got a big stamp here. Or maybe find a tattoo artist.
Free certification for everyone. Max says we're all good. We're all certified Airflow engineers now.
I do not know the answer to that. Ash, it sounded like you know.
I think Ash, you're the best one to answer it, actually.
I think because of the Apache, because it's an Apache project, Apache is the only people who could certify Airflow engineers. So Apache Airflow as a project cannot certify it. So no, there isn't, because Apache sort of doesn't. That's not how Apache operates. So maybe there's a place for a company to create a recognized qualification, but right now, no. because Apache.
But I guess that Astronomer and Google both offer certifications on their own platforms, which are close to the Apache Airflow, I would say. So if you are interested, increased job opportunities, maybe have a look over there.
Great. Are there any good instrumentation tools out there for monitoring kind of pipeline performance beyond the kind of the simple native stuff we have in Airflow? So I guess Max, this is kind of possibly one in your wheelhouse, which is
outside of homegrown, frameworks and people that have added more instrumentation in their instance of Airflow, the only one I've heard about is Databand. I think is a new startup that's looking in this space. I think that might be worth looking into. That they can do some of the more advanced analytics and like performance kind of optimization suggestion and deeper monitoring inside Airflow. I think we have pretty good instrumentation within the tool itself now, but we welcome all pull requests that are going to add more metrics, whether they're stats-D metrics, logs like server logs, or more like analytics events. I think that's always very welcome in an open source project.
Great. Yeah. There's also a Python project out there called Great Expectations, which is kind of a little bit more homebrew, but it gives you the tools you might need to build your own kind of monitoring into your pipelines. So it's nothing kind of polished and ready to go, but it looks like an interesting one.
There's been great innovation in the space of data quality. I think every company's got at least one, or every company that has a great data team is going to have at least one way to monitor data quality and do data quality type assertions. And it'd be great too if people who have built this sort of things to kind of blog about it and share those blog posts within the community.
Are there any limitations you have ever faced when using Airflow?
No, it's limitless. It's limitless, obviously. Well, I think in the past there has always been concerns around the scalability of the scheduler, I guess, and the high availability of it. I think that's being improved actually by you, Ash, in the meantime.
That's correct. Yeah.
So that's definitely improving. I would say on the usage sometimes. As it's configuration as code, right? And that's a benefit. We do enter the less Python literate people, and therefore we are reaching the limits of, I think, configuration as code, where they like to have a domain specific language with YAML files maybe that make it just a little bit easier to generate pipelines. And I think there's no true tooling yet, that's standardized with Airflow that works out of the box for those people.
Yeah, one clear early decision too was around the fact of having Airflow be really aware about tasks and not knowing too much about your data and the nature of what's going on inside the job that you're scheduling. So that was a very conscious decision to know the contract between the Airflow user and Airflow, the platform, is I tell you to run tasks, and then the platform runs the tasks as they are specified. There's been some work done by Bolke and others to make the Airflow more data aware, and there's a lot of companies too, or individuals that have built more awareness kind of on top and around of Airflow. But I think that's an interesting area for development too, getting Airflow to know more about the data that it's actually processing.
Yeah, so I guess kind of a related question, which is, are there any plans for integrating WDL or CWL, which I think is workflow definition language and common workflow language? Or kind of other sort of standard way of writing a DAG. Is there any plans to integrate that into Airflow?
I think there was a conversation around that. I think about a year and a half maybe, and at that time we decided that this would be outside of Airflow itself, because that's a domain-specific language specifically, it's on top. And as Max was saying, we're definitely focused around tasks, and I do think that any domain-specific language should take that as a starting point, while building some data awareness in it, while still being true to the foundations of Airflow. So exactly CWL, for example, that was proposed. We decided against it, also because the committers and the people needing to maintain it did not have any exposure to it and were not using it themselves. So it became, it's a big thing to add and big dependency suddenly then.
I remember
it might happen in the future, but
yeah, it was this very large pull request that was kind of donated to the project, and I think the person opening the pull request had no intention to go and manage and maintain it long term. So it's kind of giving that over to the committers, which seemed like a large thing to manage. There's also this challenge too with integration or these supporting different languages that have maybe a slightly different take as to how workflows should be defined, where there's this issue with common denominators, right? So you're only able to do the things that are supported on both sides. And really often people want the full power of the platform that they're on. That includes having the need to have escape hatches to go deeper. And now you're dealing with these languages that are more or less compatible, and that abstraction can help, but it can also kind of get in the way in some cases.
One for you, I suspect, Bolke, which is, do you have any ideas, tips, suggestions for how to kind of sell Airflow internally in an enterprise where there's hundreds of cron jobs still running? Kind of like what might you suggest to this person so they can start using Airflow in their big company?
Well, if you still have cron jobs running, I mean, that is an easy sell, I think, because those cron jobs will fail, and that's and having something to manage that, like Airflow, is going to be it's an easy sell to any of your developers, I guess, that you have available. If you want to sell to management, it gets a little bit different, maybe. But I think you should start with the developers there because they will push it forward. And there's no true equivalent, I think, at the moment in the space of Airflow. I mean, it's a huge community, and there are some alikes like Prefect, for example, or Jemariah created, and there are some commercial offerings around it. But nobody's really has the extensive support that Airflow has in that way. So a real tip is start using it. Start building your first pipelines there, and just show that it works, because the proof is in eating the pudding, I would say. And that developers will love it immediately. They love the configurations code, no XML files anymore if you're running with Uzi, for example, or if you're using Apache NiFi, could be a thing as well. You're still bound to XML files and Java code, and it's just so much easier with Python just to enter and also pip install Airflow, like I explained. There's not much that beats that.
Yeah, I think one part of the reason why we joined the Apache Software Foundation too was to help with the governance model and legitimizing the project and the tool. And now if you look for testimonials and just the list of companies that use Airflow, I think that can really help make the point that this is what the industry is using now, and it's no longer bleeding edge now. Maybe it's cutting edge, or maybe it's more mainstream than it ever was in the past. So I think it was maybe a tough sell when Bolke jumped in at ING, in 2015. I think nowadays it's very much more of a standard and rigorous large community with a nice governance model, and that comes with a lot of insurance on top.
Cool. And I guess kind of we've got time for one or maybe two more questions, which is what's the most exciting feature in Airflow 2.0 for you? Bolke, if you go first, if you know what's coming up.
Okay, I'm a little bit biased, and it hasn't even finished yet. I like the lineage feature, for example. It's been coming for a couple of years now, I would even say. I do think it changes where you can use Airflow quite a lot, and it still makes using it makes actually things easier. While lineage is associated with a lot of governance, I would say, with enterprises. But I think about it, making things easier, discoverable for data scientists on the analytics space, and then it suddenly gets a whole different dimension, and people then like it a lot more. And I'm really looking forward to have that really working as fitting with Airflow. Yeah, so that way I'll look forward to Lineage.
On my side, I'll pick the HA distributed scheduler. We've been talking about it for a long time, and I'm excited to see it come through. So, kind of scheduling at the speed, instant scheduling, and having the scheduler not be a single point of failure is going to be great.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bolke. Thank you, Max, for your time and the history and the future. And thank you very much. Everyone else, we're now going to take a 15-minute break. So grab a cup of tea, coffee, Coke, whatever you like. You're at home, I suspect. And we will be back for the next session on the hour. And that's Airflow at Société Générale. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Ash.
Thank you.